Good morning. This is Kenneth and Heather with the Advancing Equity Coalition, here to give y'all a quick recap on what went down last night at the Minneapolis School Board meeting. How are you doing today, Heather?
I'm good. The sun is shining. We like the sun to shine on our video days.
Yeah, that it helps with the lighting and everything. So,
The mood.
yeah. Um, so very exciting. Today or yesterday was the budget meeting, like the big budget meeting of the year. Um, they presented the budget yesterday. They're gonna vote on the budget in June, and so this is the perfect video to kind of get an update and a recap on what are the major investments going to look like for the upcoming school year. So, Heather, do you want to kind of run us through what actually ended up being discussed last night, and then we can go into slide of the night and our best moments from last night, our memorable moments from last night?
Yeah, it was a lot. It was an information heavy meeting. So we started off the night with some public comments. There were a lot of public comments around this debate about students being able to walk in graduation ceremonies if they have credits that they still need to finish. And then we heard a lot of public comments around the ESSER money, the large chunk of money that's getting ready to come into MPS that needs to be spent over the next 3 years. Those comments were really strongly represented by members of the Advancing Equity Coalition, so we like to hear that. And then Superintendent Graff gave us a COVID update, and that COVID update had a lot to do around the upcoming graduation ceremony. And then there was a whole debate about graduation ceremonies, which we'll get into later. Then we heard a legislative update from Josh Downham, and he talked about really how far apart the Republican Senate and the more Democratic House are from their numbers on education, how that might affect our school. We saw a budget. You talked about that. And then we also got an update on the capital improvement plan and all of the changes and moving parts that are happening with that. So it was a full meeting, lots of information to digest. And so now we're here to talk about kind of what you need to know. And what was the slide of the night when there were three presentations?
Yeah. So for the slide of the night, um, definitely decided to go with trying to share with y'all kind of where are the big priorities that the district wants to invest in for next year. So looking at some of the big department priorities, we're looking at science curriculum adoption, increased mental health support, and a lot of these things stem from priorities from the board. And so that was a big theme from last night was how does people were really excited. The board was really excited, I should say, about how they felt like this budget, more so than other budgets in the past, are aligned to the values of the board and what the board set. I would actually argue that, every year the budget reflects the board's values. The issue has always been do the do the board values and the way that the budget is allocated actually make its way to the classrooms, and do they go all the way down, which is an issue that you and I have discussed many a time. We will have a board meeting and we'll have this great presentation, and in an ideal world this is how everything would work, but then the issue is in implementation, and does it actually reflect what the board said they wanted and what the district said was going to happen. And so I think that has been kind of the issue in the past, but we'll see. But this is where I think people should really be paying attention to is like, yeah, here are some of the additional investments, or here are some of the big priorities that the district will be um, hoping to fund. The board will vote on the budget in June. So, and I think another barrier to that is just going to be understanding, like you said, where does the state come in, and where does the Senate and the House compromise for how much money they actually want to spend in education this year, because they're about like $600 million apart in terms of how much additional money they want to invest in education. So that's that's the slide of the night.
Yeah, that's something to be watching for and to be mobilizing around and to really be talking about is the rest of the state and the way they view MPS and the way what MPS needs from the state and all of those kinds of things. Um, what was your most valuable moment of the night, Kenneth?
So my most valuable moment of the night actually goes to our capital plan and hearing Senior Officer DeVette talk about, how we are able to move up a couple of projects up a year, especially in North Minneapolis. So looking at projects like Bethune's updates for their magnet programming, Hall's updates for their magnet programming, Franklin's updates for their magnet programming. I think that that's huge. And so what we're looking at now is we should have completed projects in all three of those schools by 2022. So the start of the 2022 school year, as we're trying to build enrollment in some of these magnet schools and trying to draw enrollment from other parts of the city and really change the way that integration happens instead of having north side students move south, having south side students come north for school. I think having building improvements that reflect the magnet theme is going to be a huge deal. And I think seeing those projects being moved up in terms of a year for a timeline is a really big deal. So I think that's my most valuable moment. And, again, the board will vote on the changes to the capital improvement plan in June. So something, if y'all are interested, something to definitely dive into, definitely something to email the school board and just tell them how excited you are about, some of those changes and seeing some of these big projects fast tracked. So
Yeah, it's exciting. We always say one of our coalition mottos, right, is like our kids can't wait. And what I love is that instead of like delay, 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 which is something we typically see, we're seeing it move up. So I'm just really, I was really happy to see North Side School, North Side School, North Side School, North Side School in that capital improvement plan. It's long overdue.
yeah, yeah, huge shout out to Senior Officer DeVette and the whole team for looking at the capital projects plan and making these changes and making it out work. So just huge kudos to that team for that. So yeah, what about you, Heather? What is your most valuable moment?
You know, my most valuable moment was to Senior Officer Sullivan. She
Okay.
wasn't on the in the board meeting for a real long time, but whenever she is there, I can promise you that she's going to give you very clear communication. She's going to answer the exact question that you answered. And what I love about her work and the way that she's been really thinking about human resources is she's really thinking about long-term trajectory of increasing teacher of colors and opportunity and retainment and retention and recruitment in our district. And so she really talked about the way that the dollars that are allocated to human resources are going specifically toward that goal. It wasn't just this, value system out there somewhere. She has the plan. And I really appreciated that about the presentation. I think she's doing very diligent work. So my props to go to Senior Officer Sullivan.
Yeah, I play NBA 2K a lot, and so some players have the microwave badge where they can come off the bench and just score quickly, and that's definitely Senior Officer Sullivan last night. She was on for 3 minutes and she just dropped a hammer and left, and I just was like, all right, cool. We have a real plan around teachers of color. I'd love to see more, and the deck needs to be updated actually to reflect what she mentioned last night, and so um, those updates actually aren't in the deck right now, but they should be hopefully by the time you see this video, or hopefully by tomorrow. So yeah, I thought her contribution last night was really important and really exciting. So let's go to the do better moment. Heather, do you want to start with your do better moment?
Okay, so there's this thing that we talk about in MPS. It's called predictable staffing, and one of the things that we know is that the way that schools are staffed in Minneapolis public schools has not always been fair or equitable. That white and or privileged schools have been able to maybe sort of work around or do things, and we've seen lots of interesting stories about PTA fundraising for positions and all that kind of stuff. But predictable staffing is supposed to be the way that our district is going to say, like, there's a standard in every school, right? So that we know that we are being equitable. And Director Surreal asked a question about predictable staffing last night. She was like, but how does predictable staffing work equitably? So, we understand that the idea was that we were maybe trying to get schools that typically didn't have maybe that political power or capital to get all of those extras to be able to have the same, right? So that there was some uniformity, is what we heard. Uniformity was the goal. But Director Surreal was like, yeah, but is uniformity equitable? Is it? And so Superintendent Graff said, um, we can't afford that right now. We can't afford to say that we're going to do something that we can't afford to do long term. And so I was really, it's like, I don't know, I was really troubled by the response. I was troubled by the fact that the conversation doesn't go far enough. I don't think it really does the deeper work of looking at what do we need to give students who have more needs, and a lot of those kinds of things. So my do better moment goes to Superintendent Graff for saying we can't afford.
Yeah, I think a few years ago when the idea of predictable staffing was introduced by Superintendent Graff and his leadership team, I think that was there was real excitement, right? There's an excitement that every student in Minneapolis public schools could understand what to expect when walking into their schools. And then I also think there was initially a conversation around, and we want to layer that with equity. And so not only do we want to make sure that there's a minimum that every student can expect in terms of staffing when they walk into a building, but on top of that, we need to also figure out how do we make sure that, students who or schools that have additional needs, we're able to, serve those students and provide those additional supports to those schools. And so, I think the thing that's frustrating to me is understanding that, ever since Superintendent Graff has become the superintendent in Minneapolis Public Schools, they've had four core priorities, right? And one of those core priorities that we actually talk about probably the least is equity, right? We always talk about, we've had a lot of literacy conversations. We constantly are talking about SEL, social emotional learning, and we're always talking about multi-tiered systems of support. But we do not actually talk about how equity is like the core priority within the district, at least explicitly. And so, I think hearing that, what was frustrating to me is to understand, like, equity isn't something that we can afford some years and can't afford. Like, there isn't a moment when have, we can't afford equity. Equity is a mindset, equity is a framework, and we have
Mm.
to be able to have a commitment towards equity, no matter how many resources we have within the district, to say, like, how can we most equitably support students? And I understand every student has needs, and I understand every, students across income lines, across race lines, across cultural lines, language lines, ability lines have needs, right? Have some level of basic needs that have to be met. But also we need to be thinking about what can we do to make sure that we're still providing as many resources as possible to the students who present the most needs, and we need to figure out ways to support them, because otherwise we continue to under support them and we continue to underserve them. So that I was really frustrated also when I heard that, and I was like, wait, what? We're saying we can't afford equity? Equity isn't a thing that you can afford. And I think that, this has always been my like core issue, and we can talk a little bit about it later, but it's been my core issue around how the district talks about, we don't get enough money, we don't get enough funding from the state. Well, they're going to be getting additional federal funding soon, and you know, it feels like they are just punting. They punt their problems to the state when it comes to resources, which yes, they're under resourced, and we get that. And also, like, what are they doing with the resources that they have? Are they using them? And it feels like the mindset doesn't seem like, it feels like they're saying we can't afford equity, and that's not a thing that our
Mhm.
students can really live with. So,
Mhm.
anyways, um,
Your do better moment?
yeah. So sorry, that was not my,
That was free.
but that resonated with me. So my do better moment was, so the board spent probably a good 40 minutes, I'd argue, talking about graduation requirements, and for seniors who are behind in graduation credits, if they can participate in the graduation or commencement ceremonies that are about to take place in the next few weeks. And so as Heather mentioned, during public comment, we heard a lot of teachers and I think a few parents maybe really call in to say like, yeah, we want to make sure that students who have the possibility of recovering all of their credits during summer school can like participate in the graduation ceremony and then earn their credits after the during the summer school this year. And and so there's a lot of back and forth. Some board members were like, you know what, maybe we just create a ceremony later on after they've already accomplished and recovered all their credits to give them that opportunity to walk later on the road. Some board members were like, no, you know what, we need to allow every student to walk because this is an equity issue. This is something that we want to make sure that students can participate and walk with their friends and experience some level of joy during what has been like an impossible year, which it truly has been an impossible year and a really difficult year for a lot of students, just between like how families have had relied on some of their older students, especially for childcare or work and income and different things like that. And so we've really put, our system has shown that there's been a lot of cracks and we can't adequately support like some of our families and some of our students, our older students in most need. Um, but what my do better moment was is no matter where you fell last night during that argument or during that debate about when we should have graduation rates or when we should have graduation ceremonies and who should walk and why and when and how many credits behind what is the threshold, no one talked about the fact that like during this summer school period are students learning. So usually what ends up happening is that students can pick up, I believe they said 0.75 credits usually during summer school. This year they're going to up that to 2.25 credits. And my question throughout that whole conversation is like, are students learning? Like, are students learning what they should be learning in order to attain the 2.25 credits or even the 0.75 credits? Because 0.75 credits is three full semester high school classes. And, summer school is only taking place over the course of 23 days. And so if a student is signing up for a full, 2.25 credits over the course of 23 instructional days, are they learning like what they should be learning over the course of what feels like over a year, or about a year or whatever? And so yeah, I was just shocked that there's like what this feels like is we are just asking students to, I would venture to guess no, like they're not actually learning what they should be learning over the course of a summer. um,
Well, wait, and if they are, then why do we have to take a whole semester to do it? That
yep, yep.
right?
And so that's my question. And so it feels like what we're actually just asking students to do is jump through these hoops, jump through these hoops. And so, yeah, it shouldn't matter if all we're saying is like jump through these hoops to get your credit so you can graduate. Like, why are we doing any of it? Like, yeah, then they should be able to walk whenever they want to walk. And so I have real questions and I have concerns that the board aren't asking more critical questions around like, are we making sure that we're setting up our seniors who missed a credit, who have been missing credits over the course of the last 4 years? Like, is our summer school rigorous? Is our summer school actually providing students with what they need to be provided with? Is our credit recovery system actually supporting students learning, or is it setting them up to not be successful, but we're telling them that you can leave Minneapolis Public Schools and not setting them up to be successful in a job after graduation or setting them up to go to college. And so I just think that those are additional questions that should have been asked last night, and I was frustrated that they weren't.
Yeah, I think the real question is like, do students leave Minneapolis public schools prepared with what they need to have the life that they dream of? right? And the ceremony is the celebration of that. And I think, we got what I heard last night was a conversation about the thing. And this is what happens all the time because the thing is the eminent, right? But the larger conversation that we really need to ask ourselves as an institution is lurking behind the ceremony and the debate. And so, really the question is like, are we failing students? Are students, are seniors leaving um, our our buildings ready to have the life that they dream of? And the ceremony lasts like 2 hours, and then you get some great pictures. But like, what does Monday look like for seniors? You know what? And so I think that there's a larger question that we really need to be doing the work of, that slow, steady work of like, are our teachers preparing our students for life? Um, and I think when we look at maybe something like um, the scores, the test scores, and when we look at black students, we see like SAT scores, the answer really feels like no. And so I think we've got to do deeper work here than the conversation we had last night, which is kind of what you're saying. It's like, yeah, there's more to this.
Right. And I think the point around, are we prepared? Like, we shouldn't have so many students who are that far that are that credit deficient, right? Going, and I understand again, this is a year of a pandemic, but also like this isn't a completely new phenomenon, right? Like we might have more students that are credit deficient in order to graduate, but this isn't a completely new phenomenon around having students. And so like, what are the barriers that were being held up over the course of this last year, to making sure that students got the credits and the support and the learning, right? Like we have to also remember like the credits aren't just about like having these coins in your back pocket to graduate. Like, is the
Mm.
learning happening? And so I, yeah, I don't know. I just felt like that should have been a bigger conversation amongst the board last night. So, um,
Yep. Even though that conversation was really long, it still was lacking for you.
yeah. All right. Well, this was supposed to be our short recap. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into these do better moments in our debrief. So thanks for listening, and I hope you check out our longer video.
Bye.